Before we start this week's episode, we have some exciting news to share with you. We're planning an upcoming Q&A episode and want you to be our guest. If you have any burning transportation questions you'd love to hear answered, please send us them directly at our social media channels or at marketing@rushtruckcenters.ca, and we'll do our best to answer them and get them on the air. Until then, hope you enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Transportation Exchange podcast presented by Rush Truck Centers of Canada. I'm your host, Jason Cuddy, and on today's episode, we're excited to welcome Terry Ma, who's Business Development Manager and our EV champion here at Rush Truck Centers of Canada. Terry, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot, Jason. It's great to be here. Appreciate you inviting me out.
Yeah, so we wanted to pull you in as being kind of our EV go-to here at Rush in Canada and kind of just do an overall chat about everything EV. You've kind of learned a lot by taking on some of the things we're doing, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But there's a lot of moving pieces. It seems to change daily, weekly, as far as what's out there, what's new, what's exciting. So I thought we'd just kind of go through the process of what's involved in onboarding an EV into your fleet, as we've recently done with a demo unit, and kind of give everyone the good, the bad, the ugly of what to expect as they, slowly introduce this technology into their fleet. So I guess starting off, one of the things is, I guess an assessment. I guess probably the best way to do it, right? We look at, you can get a truck. That's pretty straightforward, but what are things involved kind of before you ordered a truck that, you're talking to customers to, or you went through with the demo program?
Yeah, no, definitely. There's a lot to think about, and it is something that's being pushed from the government, obviously, and the whole industry for a lot of good reasons. But yeah, there's a lot to think about before you take the plunge and just go buy a truck or a car or anything. You gotta really understand that how you're going to power that vehicle, where it's going to go, where you're going to charge it if you need to, what the range is, what the government is offering for rebates, because there's all kinds of different places and different things you can get rebates for, from the charger to the vehicle itself, even the bodies in some cases on trucks, and depending on what province or city you're in, you might have different rebates available through those as well. So the big thing is, I think right off the bat, is assessing the power that you have at your home base or where you're going to keep your vehicles,
right? And
what power you're going to need to charge that vehicle. Because a lot of the older buildings don't have the power in them to charge, to even put the charger in. So you're going to have to pay to get a transformer. It's going to take a lot of time to get a lot of this stuff done with the power people in the area that you're in. So if they can even do it.
Right. That's a good point.
And the cost, because it can go, it can really go crazy if you really have to amp up the power at your location and you want to do, say, a bunch of trucks. Like if you have 30 or 40 trucks you want to power, there's not many buildings that have that kind of power going into them that are going to be able to power these vehicles.
That's a good point. If you're like a transportation hub, your neighbors next to you may already be a few steps ahead of you and could be, I don't say sucking up that power, but putting enough draw on the grid that, to your point, there's transformers and stuff involved. So you really got to do some due diligence even before you start ordering stuff.
Yeah. Your street might not have enough power for your neighbors, let alone yourself. So you got to think way out before you take the step and buy a vehicle. Get your property assessed for what you're going to need. All the manufacturers pretty much, and even people like Ontario Power or OPG can come in and do an assessment for you and walk you through an entire program on what you're going to need and why, and what you might want for a backup power system, because
right.
People are even doing that. TTC did that, I guess, with their big garage where they have redundancy. If they lose power, they're still going to be able to power their vehicles for like a week without any power.
Wild. Yeah, that's a good point. Like you said, even the amount of power you need, because that's part of the assessment, is determining how quick do you need to charge these things. So how much juice do you need coming in to make that happen? If you can charge them overnight, you don't need as much draw per se as if you're running, say, 24/7. These things got to charge in a 2-3 hour window.
Right. Yeah. And you really don't want to run out of power in the middle of nowhere with no chargers around.
Right.
I've had some, I mean, they call it energy anxiety or power anxiety. Whereas, I mean, if you have your vehicle and you're stuck in traffic and all of a sudden, you got your heater on, it's winter.
Yep.
And you were already at 10%. And now you're sitting there and going nowhere, and you don't want to turn your heater off, but you might have to.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? And these are all things to consider as you go through it. And like you said, there's the power part, but also kind of, where are you running these pieces of equipment, right? So like running lane route analysis, stuff like that, I guess obviously needs to be done as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Excuse me. There is most of the OEs will do a assessment for you of your lanes for your trucks, and be able to tell you whether the vehicle is going to work for you or not.
Right.
You can put it like a geo tab in the vehicle, and it'll you could leave it there for a week or two, and then they can do an analysis on that and tell you whether the vehicle is going to work for you or not, or where you might need to opportunity charge at the other end of a lane or something.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. There's so many things to think of that way. And I guess tied in with all of that, you can start to do some rough ROI calculations to kind of see, factoring in some grants and all the costs to do this, what is the financial feasibility of adding this equipment into your fleet?
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the drawbacks, obviously, right off the bat, is just the cost of the vehicles. There's, rough numbers, double or triple what a regular vehicle is.
Yep.
Not so much for cars anymore, but for trucks, it's still in that range. So there is federal and provincial rebates in different regions to bring that number back down into line a little bit. But it's the long-term return on investment that you really have to assess and see if it's going to be worth it for you.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and like I said, it's a huge cost up front. But there is some, we'll get into a little bit deeper, but there's some obviously offsetting savings from running costs that, versus traditional combustion engine. And we'll dig into a bit more that obviously play into those numbers as well that, help maybe lessen the blow. But yeah, the initial upfront cost is, currently as we speak, is still significantly large.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I know that, I've heard different numbers from 30 to 50% cheaper for maintenance.
Right.
But then again, you're going to have a battery at the end that you got to do something with. And there is recycling and reuse options for those. There's more and more businesses getting developed around those items right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the rare earth minerals, a lot of people are concerned about taking them out of the ground and having to come from China and all these things. But if you watch the news about what's going on in Northern Ontario and the rest, like Saskatchewan, there's all kinds of minerals in those those regions that people are starting to mine, and we just haven't gone after those minerals until now to make it hasn't been feasible or that much need for it.
Right. Yeah. Now that it's growing, definitely there's, provincial, federal, mandates to hit certain EV targets. Definitely the demand is there. And obviously then the funding to extract those minerals become a bit more viable, right? Mm-hmm. Because you've got a market that definitely needs it. So it's, you can see that growing for sure. And even with the batteries, like you said, at the end of life, I know from some of the events we've been to, even together, just go see customers and the EV technology is, it's a little different than say your cell phone battery. Like when it's done its usable life as a vehicle battery, it's not really at zero. There's still a lot of life in it, just not to power such a large vehicle. So there is, to your point, there's going to be businesses that pop up that can take those batteries and use them with storage banks or smaller applications that, they'll have a second life, which is great and it's needed, but none of these vehicles have gotten to that life cycle yet where that's become an option.
Yeah, exactly. That's it's not really a path that's been followed before. So it's just all trailblazing.
Yeah,
and everywhere, like all the way along this learning path that I've been going through for the last year or so, like by ordering this truck and the charging system, and again, there's rebates and just trying to work through the rebates with the governments and what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do,
right.
what kind of rebate there is for different chargers and different power of different chargers and how many of them.
No, that's a good point. Actually, and on that, the truck is one thing, and you work with your OEs to spec it out, and there's not a ton on the trucks to change. They've kind of kept them very, very straightforward, but probably the piece that when you're talking to everyone doesn't necessarily get called up in the conversation probably to the last minute, but should go with the assessment part is picking the right charger, and where do you put that in your facility? And you've literally gone through that with our location. Maybe give us some insight of what you learned or feedback you got as you went through that process.
So yeah, we actually had to change which facility we were going to put our charging system and have our whole EV program based out of, just because the ceilings in the facility that we were going to put the charging system and we actually had already started training some of the techs. And then we had to change the facility because the height of the ceiling wasn't high enough to lift a straight truck 6 feet in the air.
Yeah.
Which is the only reason we would ever have to pick up a truck that high,
right,
is because of the battery access that we have to have for these trucks.
Yeah, the accessibility is totally different, right? Like you're not opening a hood. I mean, you can, but there's nothing there for you to really play with.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, it's all new. It's all new paths. So you're learning as you go every day, and definitely there's sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but
yeah.
it happens in a regular basis until we get the path beaten down pretty good.
And I think it speaks, but going back to that assessment, right? Having someone come in, whether it's from the OE or from the charging company that's going to provide it, and walk through and understand your facility and what makes sense from the requirements. I mean, that's step number 1. It's got to be able to handle it, but then it's got to flow into what you're doing as well. You can't have 20 trucks parked on the side of a building. That's your only entrance or only exit, right? That doesn't work either. So there's, that's the assessment part is really important. I think it draws really back to that. And that's kind of, what you're find as far as, as you do due diligence on that truck that we brought in.
Yeah. Yeah. And just parking, parking a 40-foot truck trying to find a spot where you can charge a 40-foot truck is almost impossible. I've gone through that already, where I had to go and drive out to Kitchener to find a charging spot for our truck that was long enough and you could fit the truck in. And they're just, even with all the new facilities that people are putting up, nobody's thinking about trucks yet. So
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and that kind of speaks to kind of the quirks and the bugs of running this equipment. And we'll get more and hear more, obviously, as our demo goes out, as people introduce them to their fleet. But right now, the kind of things we're seeing is not so much the reliability of the vehicle, but reliability of being able to charge a vehicle when you need it, the infrastructure to support it. Like you said, yeah, there's a public charging station, but if there's 5 cars parked around it, you can't charge it, or, maybe the charging port is in a spot where the cable's not long enough, right? Or, there's so many little quirks you got to really, understand to make this thing, flow into your fleet.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely.
So, we talked, you mentioned briefly, I guess, the grants. Maybe we'll just kind of go very high level, Canada specific at this point of, what's kind of out there as far as, grants as we speak today, which is, January of 23. Mm-hmm. What are people can tap into currently? So
federally, there's I think it's called IHMZEV program that, for the large, like a Class 8 truck, the rebate is $150,000, and then it goes down from there as the smaller trucks go. It goes down with the smaller trucks,
Gotcha.
and it's based on the battery pack size.
Okay,
and it's a similar thing with the program they have for the charging infrastructure. You get more money back for the higher cost units. So, like we for instance put in a 30 kilowatt hour charger, and that's a DC charger,
right?
And then a 19,700 kilowatt hour charger, and that's an AC charger. So it's not, well, it's still a fast charger, but not the DC charger is much faster.
Gotcha.
And we basically aren't really getting any rebates for those.
Right, they're just not beefy enough.
It's just not big enough. They start giving you rebates. If you order 20 of those, you can get a rebate.
Right.
Or if you go to a 50 kilowatt hour charger, you can get a rebate of like $10,000.
Gotcha.
But you're talking, by the time you got that one installed, you're probably going to be about I don't know, 50 or 60 grand.
Well, and that's a good point. Like I remember the trucks, like you said, are already, we know roughly 2.5, 3 times cost of, internal combustion. The Chargers, I remember when we did, initial training, had some exposure to it. It's stunning how expensive these things are, right? Like if you want to charge a truck in 2 hours, that charger is going to cost you, today's dollars, maybe $60,000, $70,000 for the unit, not installed, right? That's just the actual cost of it. Like, so, that goes back to the assessment part is, do you really need to charge a truck in 2 hours? If you don't necessarily spend all that money. Well, granted, the grants obviously help offset some of that, but I think it's a good point number wise that, people may be sticker shock to really understand how much these things cost.
Yeah. And all the electric vehicles, that's the other thing you got to look at when you assess it, how fast it can charge. Like the vehicle itself will only be able to take in so much power in an hour.
Right.
So a lot of them are, set at like 50 kilowatt hours per hour.
Right.
So even if you have a 350 kilowatt hour charger, it's only going to soak in 50K an hour.
Right.
Whereas if you have a big truck and maybe it'll take in 100 or 150 kilowatts in an hour, then you could realistically charge that truck in 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah. No, good point. Yeah. Just because you have a lot of juice coming in doesn't mean the vehicle will accept it. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
So, and that's where the software comes in, right? There's a lot of software behind the scenes to manage and handle kind of that. So you could be proactive and maybe have a mixed fleet, right? Some class 8 stuff, class 6, 7, eventually maybe some smaller ones that are coming out and use one charger, and the software kind of will throttle, I guess, the power coming in so you don't cook everything.
Yeah. And they're generally they're like a smart charger. They really are smart chargers. They're not going to just kick out their maximum all the time.
Right.
They feel that basically they get feedback from the battery as to how much they should be charging and what's going to give it a longer life charge. Just like your smartphones do. They don't just do it at full blast the whole time until you're charged. And
yeah, it's measured behind the scenes, right? You don't see it, but it's handled. Software's handling it the right way.
Yeah, they're measuring the heat and a bunch of different things like that.
For sure. So outside of federal, obviously there are some provinces that have been in it longer than the federal government. And the two specifically are BC and Quebec, which have been doing it for a couple of years now. That's
right. Yeah. And you see the numbers on vehicles primarily for cars, how many more cars are being sold, electric vehicles in Quebec and in BC. So, as these new programs come out, there's going to be more across the board.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, provinces will start coming on, especially as the mandates come through, pushing to get to zero emission by a certain time frame. You got to, until the cost starts coming down, you got to help the consumer, with that cost, especially if it's mandated.
Yeah, the ground breakers are going to get that advantage, but once there's, once there's more vehicles coming out, and that's what your choices are, they're going to take these rebates away for sure.
For sure.
Because, why pay somebody to buy something they have to buy anyway?
Well, exactly. So there's that coming too. So, when you speak of products available, we'll speak, from our dealership specifically in the products we carry. Obviously with the Navistar product line, there's 2 models. Well, one currently in production you can get, which is our demo. It's the EMV. So that's available currently from our side. And then the ERH, which is your day cab, is 2024 projection. So that's kind of exciting to see. That's it should be a good little footprint for it regionally.
Yeah, and that's where it all has to start, I believe, is regionally. The long haul is we're a ways away from really doing something that's zero emissions. It's long haul.
Yeah,
it's. I'm the same way. I just bought a diesel pickup truck and I get 1,000 kilometers range. You're going to be a while before you find any EV going 1,000 kilometers reliably.
Right. And I think, we were at a meeting where they said, look, we can make the truck go 1,000 kilometers, 1,000 miles. Just, you can't carry anything. It's all battery, right? It's no different than a vehicle. Like if you want a larger fuel tank, you go forever, but at some point you're giving away something to get something. So with the technology today, I agree. The technology infrastructure doesn't really allow it in time. Sure. But so I think that the stuff that comes home every day, these, the city runs kind of thing is the sweet spot for this technology right now.
Yeah. And I think that's, the manufacturers are going to throw money at what's going to succeed for them. So, they never had the incentive to do it until now, really. And now it's really getting the big push. So the technology is going to come on faster than we are ready for, I think.
Yeah.
And the other aspect is, again, we go back to the cost of the vehicles, but the cost of the internal combustion engine vehicles has gone up 50% this year on heavy trucks.
Yep. And going to keep going. And, you know, we've been in these meetings with customers where, you know, the Rush team, specifically in the States, because CARB drives a lot of the internal combustion engine costs meeting the requirements. And, you know, from everything we saw and it was presented, it's, 24 is a big hit. From the actual cost of the engine. In between these engine cost bumps, you've got warranty increase bumps that are mandated by CARB, which eventually Transport Canada will adopt, you know, maybe not right away. Mm-hmm. But regardless, the OEs of those engines are meeting those requirements, which means everyone's paying for that engine because it's whether or not you need it to be certified to go into California or the states that adopt it. The engine can do it. And so you're paying for that technology.
Yeah. And a lot of you see it already. Some of the suppliers that can't bring in their vehicles right now because of diesel motors, they can't meet emissions.
Yep.
It's going to get worse next year. And then it's going to be even worse in
27, I think.
26 or 27.
Yeah. It's the next bump. And
if they go up, if those engines go up $25,000 every time there's a bump, the truck prices are going to be very, very close to what the electric is.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how they've been talking to it is, you know, the grants help bring the cost down a bit, but it's not so much that the electric vehicles will come down to the market rate currently of the internal combustion. It's that the internal combustions will keep climbing because of these engine hits, that the gap gets smaller and you throw a rebate at it. All of a sudden now the gap between the two isn't 150 grand, maybe it's 30 grand, you know, and if you already have charges in that. So by the time you do 30 grand, you run through your ROI and look at the maintenance spend, all of a sudden now it's a viable option compared to, you know, a new piece of equipment with an internal combustion engine.
Yeah, definitely. That's I think that's the whole idea, and it's going that direction without much of a which there's not much debate about the fact that not having to put fuel in your vehicle after after a very short time with where diesel prices have gone, and not having to put, rebuild a transmission or put fuel rails or your regen system, or you don't have to put DEF in either. And
yeah, there's a lot of advantages to it, which, we'll dig in a bit more. And like I know of when we talk about the product lines, Navistar, we carry a few other ones that are dabbling. Battle Motors, which is a new one for us. They have an electric, so that's your, those are a little bit different if people aren't familiar with them. They're, basically kind of like your garbage truck that you see out on the street. And we had them on the podcast a little while ago, so you can hear more about them. But, it's a low entry vehicle, class 6 to 8. And, they've got a electric version, 240 kilowatt hours, range of, I think they're about, I'm trying to remember the numbers now, but, a couple hundred kilometers kind of thing. Nothing crazy, but those are very specific applications, a lot of stop and go. So it kind of makes sense to have actually an electric vehicle in that to some extent, for the wear and tear you normally get on the engine stopping and starting and whatnot.
Yeah, again, the regional stuff or the low mileage vehicles that even the heavy haul stuff or the local heavy haul stuff, it all makes sense for those kind of vehicles.
Yeah.
We've also got the Isuzu vehicles, which apparently are coming out with electric in the next year or so.
Yeah, it seems to be the noise. Nothing's official. Nothing's been officially announced by them, but it seems to be they're targeting like a 24, have something to talk about, I guess, whether it's production or a prototype. But and to me, that's the sweet spot for a lot of these. A lot of the initial use of this vehicle.
I understand they do have some running around in California.
Yeah, which would make sense. That's your testing ground. So, it'll take a while for us to see them.
Yeah.
but it, as they say, stay tuned, right? It's coming. So I think, Kalmar was another one we have, which they've dabbled with different suppliers. And I think they've had some challenges finding the right supplier to get them where they need to. I've driven the battery electric, shunt truck, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
Just that partnership didn't work. So they're kind of back to drawing boards. So it might be a little while till they get that one up and running, but that's, again, probably another year or two. Hopefully we see that to market as well. So every product line we carry is either working on it or has it to market or about to drop it very soon, which is exciting for it.
Yeah. And that's the other end of it, is that the diesel engines, there's not a lot of new R&D going into those motors.
Right.
There's only a couple of suppliers that really are spending money. We just came out with the S13.
Correct.
but we also announced it would be the last diesel motor we ever designed
from scratch. Yeah, that's the last one, and we had them on there chatting about it. And yeah, it's cool what they've done from a fuel efficiency point of view versus the previous technology or previous, I guess, version of that engine. But yeah, they're very blunt. That is it. No more R&D to make a new engine when this one's done, right?
Yeah.
So it's coming.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's even in the oil patch, you see they're not spending much money on new developments and R&D because the government's trying to get rid of the oil business almost.
Yep. Yeah.
But they're not supporting it anyway anymore.
Not to the extent they were before, because like you said, but it's opening up other areas of mining and exploration that, was untapped. So it's definitely a shift, right?
Yep.
We're seeing it. And, with the shift, I think, probably a great way to finish this off is, let's go through some of the, the advantages, disadvantages, if you want to call it, but, the pros and cons of what we've seen, what we've heard, what you've actually been through, with what we're doing of, the EV in your fleet, so maybe we'll, let's maybe walk through some of the, maybe the cons or negatives or something that's, wouldn't be normal to you right now running an internal combustion engine.
No, there's definitely on both sides, either advantages, disadvantages, ecologically, with the advantages of the electric, you're not going to have any fuel spills.
Right.
You don't need more oil pipelines.
Yeah,
these kind of things. There's very little oil in one of these vehicles, just in the gearbox, basically, or the diff or the wheel ends, if for grease or whatever.
Right.
But you definitely don't have anything that you need to worry about in the driveline, or to burn in the fuel,
right,
or to clean that.
Yeah.
All those things are gone. You don't have to clean those parts. You don't have to, take off, do your oil filters and all those things that just go in the trash or the waste.
Yeah, or spill everywhere when you don't tighten something.
Yeah, or when you look at a fuel island at a diesel pump, you see oil all over the ground, and nobody wants to see that. So that'll be gone.
Yep.
Again, no DEF, no fuel additives, no fuel heaters. A lot of parts going to be off the truck that were maintenance items.
Right.
The basics, you're still going to have, obviously, your wipers and heaters and stuff like that, but no cat converters. I mean, there's a lot of minerals and things in them that nobody wants to hear about.
Yep, that's true.
How do you get rid of one of those? I guess they all get stolen now.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's been the way for years, for the last 7-8 years, and it seems to be kind of coming back again.
Yeah, and no fuel tanks on your truck, no ether for cold starts.
Yeah.
Those are all good things. You don't have to prime your fuel system if you run out of fuel.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I think then the other big positive is brake life, right?
Right.
Like it seems to be the big trade-off that everyone speaks to.
Yeah.
Right.
The regen brakes, like our REMV has the 3-level brake regen. So you can basically drive it with almost like a golf cart. When you let off the gas, it slows right down to almost a stop.
Yeah.
Or you can have it so you don't even feel the regen, and it does very little regen then. But you definitely are not using almost any brake life at all.
Which is wild. Like to think that's it's a huge item for a lot of fleets. I mean, with just the way the vehicles you're going through brakes, frequently. It's a major maintenance item that fleets play with outside of tires, which, when you speak, I guess, to the disadvantage, the trade-off of using regen braking is and the vehicle weight is you will wear through tires a little bit quicker, not excessively, but definitely you'll probably flip through them a little bit quicker than you're used to right now. Yeah,
definitely. But you are regaining that energy, and that's wasted energy if you look at it the other way, right?
Yeah. So there's a benefit to it. And, when you get to the cons or disadvantage, I think the biggest one, like you'd mentioned earlier, is really the infrastructure and range anxiety, right? Like what happens when you are, 50 kilometers from home base and your gauge says you've got 10 kilometers to go and there's nowhere around where you can charge. Like, how do you get home, right? You can't just go get a jerry can of fuel the whole infrastructure support, it'll get there for sure. But as it is today, I mean, that's definitely, in everyone's back of their minds. Like, what if I go too far? What if I want to do one more drop and or I get stuck in traffic, or you're stuck on the highway, there's an accident, like how do you mitigate, that?
And towing is not cheap.
Right.
Yeah. But, there's not many options. I mean, charging it on the spot is pretty much impossible for the big trucks.
True.
I don't know how you would do a small vehicle, but there might be ways to do that. And then the disadvantage, I think off the bat, is just justifying the cost. Yeah. And now with interest rates up, it's a little bit more of an issue.
Tougher swallow for sure.
Battery replacement, that kind of thing.
Those are the unknowns.
There's things to learn about that. And I really like to, and I honestly do believe that eventually they're going to be coming out with better and better batteries that are smaller and lighter.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can buy lithium batteries now for your snowmobile. I saw a guy put one on, and the thing weighs like 3 pounds, and the old one weighs 25 pounds. And the guy was buying it just to do that, and just to save 20 pounds on his sled.
Yeah. Well, and I think the technology moving so fast, like, we go back to Navistar product line. You look at the EMV, it's 6 banks of batteries, right? 2 rows of three each. So, and it's, that gets you, I think it's 125 miles is roughly what they're saying, give or take. And the ERH that, we saw, it's a prototype only still. It only has 2 battery packs. Mm-hmm. So it's different chemicals and chemistry that they're using, and that gets twice as much range. So as the years go on, like, to your point with the batteries, they'll get smaller and smaller and probably hold more and more. So the technology will keep changing and evolving to be more productive and get rid of the range anxiety. But where we are today, it's still that great unknown part, right?
Yeah. Well, just like the cars, the old cars and versus the new cars.
Yeah.
I mean, cars now last way longer. They get way more power out of a smaller motor.
That's insane. Yeah.
And it'll happen with the batteries too.
Yeah. Yeah,
but it's going to take time, and we're still in the initial stages. And, as long as we keep in the range what we're going to do with them exactly, and target the regional stuff to start with, that's going to be the winner.
Agreed. So I think, the best way to sum that up and kind of sum up the conversation today is, hey, if you're interested in looking to it, to add it to your fleet, obviously reach out. We can help you. We've got a team that does it, but I think the biggest thing is let's get the assessment going, get the conversation going before you order a vehicle. Understand your facility, your location, what you're trying to do with the fleet, where are you going, what are you carrying, and then go from there and start seeing how it fits into your world. But I think the assessment is really the biggest first step before you go too deep into it. And I think it's a clear one to make sure everyone understands that. And, like, reach out, make some phone calls, let's get the conversation going before you go too deep and order trucks you can't use for 6 months.
Yeah, and you can start with baby steps. Start with 1 truck or something like that, just to get to know the product. And then, if it all makes sense to you after a year or so, then maybe you want to start planning.
Yeah, with lead times
to expand, because it is coming, unless another government comes in and changes everything. Which I don't see that absolutely happening.
No, I mean, you see it in the States. I mean, it's full steam ahead. So, and in Europe too, right? I mean, the technology is even further ahead in Europe. So it's ahead of the game. And, like you said, to test it even, for what you're doing in Champion, we've got a demo program, right? So, reach out to us and let's try a demo, see how it fits into your fleet, play with it, touch it, feel it, just really get an understanding, get driver's feedback, which is the other fun part to kind of do. But, there's lots to absorb, and thanks for doing this chat. I think it was very informative, giving everyone kind of a general overview of really what is the landscape, from 23 going forward of battery electric vehicles. And I think it's a good overview of, things to think about and consider as you look at it, adding these to your fleet potentially.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. Thank you for having me on, and look forward to hearing from people feedback on this.
Agreed. Well, hey, that concludes today's episode, and I want to thank Terry from us here at Rush for joining us today. And to catch up on past episodes, check out transportationexchangepodcast.ca. And until next time, thanks for listening.